Between 1998 and 2003, over the span of 5 seasons, Parma Calcio 1913 spent over €320 million, or in other words, just shy of €540 million in today's money. I'm sorry, who spent this much money? Yeah, Parma. A team with a pretty troubled financial history, a team who have struggled to get back into the first tier of Italian football, just this season getting promoted into the Serie A from the Serie B as they won the league. Today, the team's total market value is worth around about €78.5 million, around about 15% of what they spent 20 years ago. Not only did they just spend a ton of money back in the day, they had literal superstars playing for them. The likes of Gianluigi Buffon, Fabio Cannavaro, Christo Stoichkov, Joan Sebastian Veron, Gianfranco Zola, and Herman Crespo, just to name a few. Today we look to uncover how it is that they've only just found themselves back in the Serie A in 2024. And I guess, what on earth happened? We're also going to take a look at the other 2 teams that have been promoted with Parma this season into the Serie A from the Serie B, as they also have an interesting past. Parma actually declared bankruptcy in 2015. And if we just refer back to the start of the video, where they've spent around about €500 million in today's money over the course of a few seasons, it's not hard to imagine how they found themselves in this ridiculous situation. Financial troubles were brought about in late 2003 by the Parmalat scandal. This caused the parent company to collapse and resulted in the club operating in a controlled administration until January 2007. So I mentioned the Parmalat scandal. Well, they're an Italian dairy and food corporation. Having become the leading global company in the production of long-life milk, the company collapsed in 2003 with a $14 billion unexplained hole in its accounts. As I mentioned before, Parmalat being Parma's parent company, meaning that when they went bankrupt, so did Parma. Well, not straight away, but that's why they went into administration. Eventually. It's not really football related, but at the same time, it kind of is. How did Parmalat find themselves with a €14 billion gap in their accounts? Well, the Parmalat scandal is a mess and it is very interesting, so yeah, let's take a look. In 1997, Parmalat expanded into financial markets, financing several international acquisitions, expanding into other parts of the world such as the Western Hemisphere, however, in massive debt. They would hope that basically by expanding over time, they would recuperate and begin to profit. That never actually did happen. By 2001, many of its new divisions were producing massive losses, and the company financing shifted largely to the use of derivatives, apparently at least in the part with the intention of hiding the extent of their losses and debt. From here, it is a complete and utter mess. People were dropping like flies at the top of Parmalat. Whether it was Fausto Tonner, or Callisto Tanzi, or Alberto Ferreris, or Luciano Del Soldato, they would come into the CEO or CFO position, realise the extent of the situation, and resign. And it was basically just on a huge loop. In 2003, it was initially announced that they had a €300 million bond issue, basically a debt that they tried to raise money for in the form of a fundraiser, but that was quickly basically dropped. In late 2023, the company shares depreciated significantly as the result of publicised concerns raised over transactions with mutual fund Epicurum, a Cayman-based company. Hundreds of thousands of investors lost all the money and will never recover it. Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi changed bankruptcy laws to allow companies to seek accelerated protection from creditors by giving extraordinary powers to a government-appointed administrator. At the time, Callisto Tanzi, who was the top dog, was detained hours after the firm was declared officially insolvent in late December and admitted that there was a hole of €8 billion in Parmalat's accounts, but denied any cover-up. The arrest of 5 other executives followed. The auditors of the administration eventually determined that the debts amounted to €14.3 billion, which was almost 8 times the sum originally stated. Several of the company's subsidiaries subsequently went insolvent, including the Brazilian, Argentinian, and American operations and its football club, Parma. So, a €14.3 billion hole was recovered in Parmalat's accounts. Of course, Parmalat being Parma Football Club's basically the parent company, meaning that they were really the company that were funding Parma, hence why they were able to spend, €340 million in the space of 5 seasons, which was completely and utterly unheard of back in 2000 and around those times. So I was kind of wondering the same thing as most people probably wondering, is this related to the Mafia? Could it be? And you know how the Mafia is portrayed in like TV programs, movies, series, so on. Well, in March 2004, anti-Mafia prosecutors in Italy have said that collapsed food companies Parmalat paid hundreds of thousands of euros a year to the Mafia in return for a monopoly for their products in southern Italy. So while there isn't any concrete evidence of them being straight up linked to the Mafia, they've definitely had contact with them, they were definitely cooperating with them, and they were definitely paying them off in order to basically let them sell their products. And I know it's not a 100% direct link, but that sort of company was funding the purchase of players that we mentioned before. They were paying them hundreds of thousands of euros that they simply just didn't have. They have a 14.5 billion euro debt. And even though that wasn't strictly football related, I feel like it was quite important to set the scene. Now let's move on to the football. Well, first, if you are still watching this video and you're enjoying and you're interested in football content in general, then after this video, maybe you should check out some of my other videos. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy, it just means you'll never miss another video. As I mentioned before, they went bankrupt in 2015, and they were basically liquidated. As you can see here, they got straight up relegated and ended up in Serie D. Obviously, it wasn't a straight relegation, it was because they had to start afresh and basically start again. They earned themselves 3 back-to-back promotions, all the way up to the Serie A in just a space of 3 seasons. They would finish 14th, and then the next season they would finish 11th, but really struggle the next season and get relegated with just 20 points. They had a really bad first season in Serie B, and then worked their way up to eventually being promoted last season from the Serie B, and for next season into the Serie A. What a complete and utter rollercoaster. While Parma have never actually won the Serie A, they did finish second in the 96-97 season. They are 3-time winners of the Coppa Italia, no surprise, 2 of those being in the golden era. They also won the UEFA Cup twice, once in the 94-95 season and again in the 98-99 season. Now, I mentioned before that Parma were recently put into administration and are only just really fully recovering. Well, that wouldn't be the first time, considering they were actually liquidated in 1968. It has got to be one of the most confusing footballing stories I've ever seen. But enough doom and gloom. Last season they got promoted, so they must be doing something right at this point. And there's been quite a few players that seem to have particularly stood out. For example, 20-year-old Australian centre-back Alessandro Cercati, 23-year-old Spanish central midfielder Adrian Bernabe, and 20-year-old French centre-forward Angie Joan Bonny. Of course, that's just to name a few. Lots of other players flourished last season too. Now, current Champions League winner and Real Madrid manager Carlo Ancelotti used to actually manage Parma between 1996 and 1998. He'd also play for Parma too, between 1975 and 1979. Parma aren't a small club. They've got multiple European honours. In the past, housed some of the best players in the world at the time, and found themselves in numerous sticky situations where they've kind of just not really had much luck with management. And when I say management, I don't mean the manager. I mean how the club is managed as a whole, the finances, the parent company, and so on. Of course, nowadays, leagues all over Europe are much more concerned about how clubs, generate the money, their income. Everything's scrutinised a lot more. And of course, that legitimate income will then determine basically how much money they can spend. So even today, if they were to have ridiculously rich owners, they couldn't just go out and buy the likes of Kylian Mbappe. But as I mentioned before, it isn't just Parma that we're talking about today. We're also going to talk about Como, and we're also going to talk about Venezia. Of course, Como have just been promoted to the Serie A this season. However, they were relegated from the Serie A in the 2002-03 season. This was followed by 3 consecutive relegations, culminating in a demotion to the Serie C2 at the end of the 2004-05 season following a playoff. Financially overstretched, they were declared bankrupt and excluded from participation in Italian professional football. They were immediately admitted to the Serie D, the top level of non-professional football in Italy. They spent 3 seasons before earning promotion back to the Serie C2 in the 2007-08 season, and after further bankruptcy in 2016, a new company refounded the club in 2017 and was admitted to the Serie D for the 2017-18 season. The 21st century saw Como experience a brief revival, a promotion to the Serie B in 2001, and also an appallingly violent incident in a game against Modena, resulting in captain Massimiliano Ferringo being handed a 3-year ban. The incident took place on November 19th, 2000, in a match against Modena. After the match, he attacked Modena player Francesco Bertolotti inside the locker room, who was his former teammate. He fell to the ground, hit his head, and ended up in a coma. After undergoing a complex surgery, he remained in a coma for 9 days, and then remained hospitalised for a long time. Due to the after effects of the trauma, he had to abandon football altogether. I've played football for a long time, and while you can definitely get caught up in the heat of the moment, that's just insanity. He deserved the ban. So far, that's 2 of the 3 teams that have been promoted from Serie B to Serie A who have suffered multiple administrations/liquidations in the history. Let's see how different that is for Venezia. Well, between 2002 and 2012, Venezia didn't go bankrupt once, not twice, but 3 times. That means in the past 20 years, they've actually missed a season altogether twice. Were briefly promoted to the Serie A in the 21-22 season, although they'd finish bottom on 27 points, and immediately be relegated back to the Serie B. When they aren't just recovering from their latest bankruptcy, they seem to sit pretty comfortably in the Serie B. So out of the 3 teams that have been promoted from the Serie B to the Serie A, between them they have 7 bankruptcies. Well, I've got to say, it's pretty impressive that they've all just been promoted. And while sure, Venezia have always been a relatively small club, and for the most part same for Como, the same just can't be said for Parma. It's crazy to think the calibre of club that they were, the amount of money that they spent, the trophies that they won, the players that they had, and terrible ownership that can send a club into such a downward spiral. But regardless of that, that is basically the 3 teams being promoted from the Serie B this season. 7 bankruptcies, some of the best players in the world, some of the best European honours, terribly managed finances, but potentially on the up, all gaining promotion into the Italian first tier. Well, that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, then maybe you should check out my previous video. It should be on the screen right now. In that video, we took a look at the worst national team in the world. Full stop, San Marino. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.